The Cyber Resiliency Act over in Europe actually is doing a better job of enforcing regulations for organizations that are based out of Europe but have operations in the States are starting to push those requirements, those regulations into their clients here because we're seeing failed audits. Not because they're failing an audit because of some regulation coming from the States based on what we're talking about that was just published. It's because of what the CRA is telling those European companies what they need to be doing.
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Craig Duckworth.
I'm Dino Busalaki.
Dino, what's on your mind today?
Well, we could talk about zero trust, right? And what that means. And you talk about IT versus OT. We also hear IT OT convergence a lot, and I still see a lot of IT versus OT. A lot of it stems back to what you've heard me say many times on these podcasts, that the IT organizations aren't tapping into the integrators and OEMs and trying to get a complete picture or a full understanding of the technology and control system solutions that are within their manufacturing facilities, right? And really understand it, right? To the extent where a single template may not always work for you because your plants aren't the same. And you're not really interviewing those that are closest to your manufacturing processes and operations.
Okay, and I agree 100% with that. And I think that the timing is very spot on. I know that there was a publication just issued on April 29th, which was a joint publication between CISA, Department of War, Department of Energy, FBI, and Department of State that outlines adapting zero trust principles to operational technology. And their recommendation slash about an eighth of an inch shy of mandating zero trust in OT to help begin securing and applying those principles that you talked about to that OT environment. And this article talks about the differences in why it's not the same as an IT approach. So I think that the timing is perfect.
Yeah. And how many OT organizations do you think are actually reviewing that material?
My guess, not many of even know it exists, but if you want to reach out to me, I will send you the document. So there we go. So now everyone has access to it. How's that?
Well, one of the questions is getting back to the IT-OT relationship getting tighter and aligned and collaborative. How many IT organizations you actually think read or get their hands on a proposal that's coming from a control systems integration group like ours and what it is that we're pitching to their manufacturing environment?
Very few, if you want to know my opinion, which
I would bet none.
well, few is like two. So none is, I'm higher than you, but neither of us is a big number.
Well, because it would roll back, right? Because if IT was reading those, they would have questions, and those things would roll back to the organization that's proposing this new expansion or line or lifecycle replacement of control systems within your environment that would have some of these requests around zero trust, around cybersecurity, things that IT should be pushing, but it's not making its way to those folks that are actually pitching and proposing control system solutions to their manufacturers. I see them. I even see them in our own proposals. It's a question when you look at the fact that you're going to build a network and you're going to put control systems on it. And for those of you that want to know what control systems are, I would learn what PLCs are. I would learn what HMIs are. I would learn what engineering workstations are, what drives are, robots, motors and pumps, all these IoT or OT assets. Understand what's coming into your environment that's being touched. And none of these principles are being applied to us to meet those requirements, right? So, and we see it with the Cyber Resiliency Act over in Europe actually is doing a better job of enforcing regulations for organizations that are based out of Europe but have operations in the States are starting to push those requirements, those regulations into their clients here because we're seeing failed audits. Not because they're failing an audit because of some regulation coming from the States based on what we're talking about that was just published. It's because of what the CRA is telling those European companies what they need to be doing. And they're just pushing that overseas. And at the same time, if you're an OEM shipping equipment into Europe, now you're being tasked with meeting those CRA requirements for machine centers that you're sending overseas.
Well, it goes back to the CRA in Europe has teeth. Look at GDPR from a privacy in Europe. It has teeth. It has significant financial monetary impact for violations. Look at some of the stuff that the US does. There's no teeth behind it. There's no, I guess, reason that businesses should comply because the cost of non-compliance is irrelevant. It's minimal in compared to compliance. Maybe if you don't comply, if the fine was 20x or 1 times annual revenue or something that really hurt organizations, then they would say, I know it's going to cost me $2 million to do this, but if I don't do it, it's going to cost me $50 million versus looking at it the other way and saying, this is going to cost me $2 million to do, but I don't think I'll get caught. And if I do, it's a $50,000 fine. Who cares? Got to look at it that way.
Also, in this country, depending on the administration, sometimes regulations ramp up, other administrations come in, regulations ramp down. And I would say in the current administration in the United States, regulations are ramping down, right? So again, back to your point, there's no teeth in it.
But if we go back and we look and we touch a little bit on that proposal, and is IT reviewing or looking at proposals for control system upgrades, modifications, whatever? You mentioned the network. In that, there's going to be IT technologies. There's going to be servers. There's going to be switches. There's going to be technology that IT very well may be interested in looking at or understanding, and they're not.
No, yeah. I mean, operating systems, the firmware versions. When you think of the OS, you think of what IT goes through to set up an OS, to harden that cybersecurity posture. None of that is being applied to these control systems that are bringing in Windows machines that are landing in your environment. And then sometimes what happens is we find that for those organizations that are using VM infrastructure to run their HMIs and their historians and their OT application servers and their engineering workstations, some of those EDR packages, antivirus, for example, endpoint protection, is being applied after the fact. And then we find that it's being disruptive because it was never really designed and set up correctly to operate in that environment, meaning that IT and OT aren't working together to determine where that disruption may come when a scanning tool fires off because CrowdStrike is starting to scan these machines and it's being disruptive to the communications because it's taking resources to communicate to connected physical systems in a timely manner. And if those connected physical systems do not receive timely communications, what do? They fall. They'll fail safe, right? And all of a sudden now my $100,000 an hour packaging line generating revenue is idle.
It's sitting there taking a break. It's having a coffee.
And OT doesn't even know why, because they don't know what that antivirus package is doing on those machines, who's firing it off, and when are they really trying to work around schedules to make sure that those aren't impactful? Are they working with the engineering teams who designed and built those things to determine what are the resources required to do that? When's the best time to run that stuff? None of that stuff is happening, right? You're back to IT versus OT, not IT-OT convergence.
Right. It puts it back in the silo. So a couple things that were interesting after reading this article, back to kind of the topic here, is in this document, let me see if I can find it real quick. It really talks about some of the differences. And one thing I want to kind of point out is on the IT versus OT segmentation. As you're going through this zero trust in your environment, you're laying in segmentation, it specifically calls out from an OT practice, the primary goal is protect physical processes, provide safety and reliability and prevent disruption versus an IT focus, which is contain breaches, enforce compliance, and manage access. So now you have the, let's call them regulatory bodies that are kind of trying to drive this, are saying, look, safety and availability are a priority in the OT environment. And the approach should be with those in mind, not so much on an IT perspective where you're trying to manage data and enforce compliance. They're recognizing and trying to shift that focus down.
Yeah. Well, and the OT world is dealt with that in a couple of different ways, right? One is they set up it and they architect their control systems in such a manner that that stuff never makes its way down to get the visibility to do that because they're protecting themselves for everything you just said, safety, operational integrity, and protect the process. So what do? They put components in place to block that access, right? And we see it all the time, right? Because out of all these cybersecurity tools that are being sold, these IT organizations are buying, and they're seeing a third or less of their OT assets still have huge blind spots throughout the manufacturing environment because they got jump boxes in there, got PLCs with multiple Ethernet cards in them. They have local networks that they've put in that are natted, et cetera, that are not visible to IT's purview to be able to do this hunting or enforcement. And what the OT guys would say, especially the OT ecosystem that supply a lot of these machine centers and this technology and design and build these control systems, would basically say, yeah, don't do that stuff because you're going to be disruptive. They break things, whether they push out patches, whether they do their scanning, they make configuration changes to the environment that are impactful because they do it on the fly in a lot of cases. It's not a well thought out process in order to do that because the IT people are too far removed from how that plant operates on a day-to-day basis to be effective, to be able to implement those solutions or those strategies or enforcement of whatever regulations they might be after from a data perspective. But it's still a disconnect. I see it in the proposals that are being written by these control systems integrations groups. I see it in the way these control systems are architected and set up. And there's just not any continuity between these two groups. You know, they're not practitioners. At the end of the day, the IT folks are not practitioners when it comes to OT. How do you change that? How is the best way to change that narrative and flip it?
Well, again, you have to begin collaboration. You have to start with the end goal in mind. You have to say, okay, here's what we want to achieve. How collectively can we work together to get that? And both sides of that coin get what they need or as close to it as possible from the beginning. And there's some give and take in that process. I was looking at an architectural design of a network a couple weeks ago where the client was looking for visibility and they were trying to figure out how to see their east-west traffic. And based on what they were using, the architecture that they had top level PLCs with two NICs, like you mentioned. Below that was a set of DLR rings that were invisible to the top layer. And there were the tune of 25 DLR rings underneath that they had no idea, which represented thousands of assets. And they wanted to know why they couldn't get to those because they were architected that way and designed that way when they were installed.
Right. So how do you cross that divide, right? That you either have to have OT people who have the inherent skills and experience to drive improving that cybersecurity posture to get that east-west traffic in a meaningful way without being disruptive, right? And that means, again, you have to be connected to that plant intimately, right? Not from 1,000 miles away. I mean, intimately, right? And you need to be part of the upfront design and engineering of those control systems so that you understand what a DLR ring is. I mean, if I talk to most IT organizations, they have no idea what a DLR ring is and what it's used for, how it's set up and what's in place to make that happen, even how it operates, right? Its topology. Yeah, it's a ring. That's your topology, right? What protocols is it using? What kind of switching technology are they using? How does that traffic flow through those devices that are out there with your drives and your PLCs? They don't know because they are not part of the design phase. So, are you going to put your IT people into that mix? Or is the OT or ecosystem have to grow up and mature and be able to provide the cybersecurity solutions, strategies, and capabilities within the design of the control systems that they're putting together and starting up and commissioning in these plants?
Well, if you know that in the design phase, your intention for this new facility is to incorporate technologies that are going to have visibility into your assets and provide cybersecurity capabilities, then in the beginning phase, you should have a minimum placeholder that says, talk about cybersecurity before we pencil to paper and design this whole thing and pull all the cable and get it all done. So that would have been an easy process and would have saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of trying to fix it after it was already done.
Well, and I've been through a few of these exercises, right? Where if you go to the OEM and try to get in front of what they're going to pitch and propose, they will either turn around and say, we're not doing it. They'll flat out tell you, no, we're not doing that. Or that's going to add $1 million to your project. And it's going to take another 6 months or a year, right? On a capital spend, where I'm saying on August 1st of 2027, I plan to be up and running, not 2028 or 2029, working with a party that's not connected to my CapEx project to get it start up and running by August 1st of 2027. And I've seen that. I've seen those go back and forth. And usually what happens is the CISOs and CIOs and the IT, they don't want to fight those battles. They just don't. And so they ignore it, leave it alone, which is typically what they see. Because if they were really trying to push their way in, they'd be calling organizations such as ours to say, here's what you have to design and build as part of this new packaging line that you're going to put in this plant. And that's just not happening. It's just not. And I would argue it because you're looking at one of the largest food and bev system integrators in North America, and we have zero calls from CISOs and CIOs. Zero.
Well, hopefully, if we kind of circle back around a little bit to the zero trust and trying to layer in that into the OT space, hopefully this will facilitate some of those conversations. Hopefully they will take this and begin making those phone calls and going back to their Rolodex and asking their OT counterparts, hey, I know we got like 8 manufacturing sites. Who does our work down there? Because we don't have any people. Who's doing our control work? Who's helping us when our stuff breaks? And then maybe pick up the phone and call and ask as they're trying to figure out micro-segmentation, trying to figure out how to implement this down in that control layer, because it's not going to be as easy as it is on the IT side.
Well, zero trust OT, an OEM would say, well, don't connect it to anything. That's zero trust for them. And then you turn around and say, well, how are you going to support me? But you have to have remote access. I'm not going to stay down for a couple of days, wait for somebody to fly out to this plant in the South 40 of Nebraska to get me back up and running. No, you provide remote access for them to do that. And if you don't do it, they're going to put it in themselves, them in the plant to get it done. Long story short, everything's connected. They'll lie to you and say, yeah, it's not connected. Because they'll say, because I got a PLC and they're acting as my segmentation device. And at the end of the day, IT doesn't own that asset. Yeah, they can say our company owns that asset. No, your OT people own that asset at the end of the day. They are the asset owner. And they're going to determine how to best manage and control and administer and support that. Right. And they're the ones that don't have the cybersecurity skills. They're the ones that don't have the budget. They don't have the resources. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the relationships with the vendors that supply this technology. They don't have any of that stuff. And so how are you going to build that? You're going to have to tap into the OT ecosystem to find those practitioners that have the practice, that have the resources, who have the partnering relationships, who understand zero trust, who understand how to improve your cybersecurity process, understand security frameworks, right?
OT's been left to their own devices for far too long and been forced to figure it out, make it work, come up with a solution. And we see it all the time from IT saying you can't have access to the internet in the plant. The plant says, I need it for this. Here's the 45 hoops you got to jump through to get it. Plant manager picks up the phone, calls the ISP, they pull in a separate line, they run it, and it's in there. And then IT comes to turn it off, and the plant manager's like, go ahead, turn it off. The whole plant goes down. Call the CEO, see what he thinks. And it's there for years.
Or they'll put in a Cradlepoint cellular modem. Yep. And so is that zero trust, right? So it all sounds really good in theory, but in practice, how are you going to get there, right? At some point, you got to get all liars in the same room and really try to work through this, right? And we're just not witnessing that. Personally, I don't think a lot of IT leaders really want to own it at the end of the day. I just don't think they do. When you have a CISO whose tenure runs between 18 and 26 or 28 months, they're short timers. You got 40 plants in your fleet. That person is never going to figure this out. I don't care how smart they are, or how connected they are. They're never going to figure this out in that realm.
Well, and the advice of this briefing from CISA and the FBI and everybody else is, and they talk about methods to do that. And one specific thing that they talk about is this is not a rip and replace scenario. We don't believe that's the right approach. We should layer on the zero trust, provide micro-segmentation, and use what you have today. I got to think, Dino, there are some significant challenges with that approach. Not that it's bad, but it's not just going to be a check a box. So give me some advice. How would you approach, if you have a plant let's pick a nice young one, 20 years old, and you're trying to put in some zero trust and some micro segmentation, and the goal is you can't rip and replace everything you have, which you wouldn't do anyway. How would you approach it?
Well, I was talking to one client last week and trying to determine, they failed an audit. It really came because of the European CRA stuff, because they're a European company, have operations in the States. They failed the audit. My first question to them is, well, how much visibility do you really need in your plant? They go 100%. And I'm like, all the way down in the level one, any device connected to the network, right? And then my next question is, well, tell me about the OEMs that you have, that you're going to have to, and you've got dozens of them, that we're going to have to sit down and you're going to have to review your contracts to determine how do you keep from becoming null and void, and trying to implement changes in that environment that they will turn around and say, well, you're going to void the contract for our support. You're on your own. So you have to wade your way through that. This particular client, their stuff has been out there so long that their warranties had expired. Now they have free reign to do what they want. But again, you're talking about stuff that's 20 plus years old, right? And still generating revenue, building the widgets that they build, they sell. So you have to get through that, right? And then you're going to get your asset inventory. You really want to understand how your network's put together, because in a plant, there's no singular network owner. You have one from an IT perspective that owns the business systems in the plant, and probably if there's an IDMZ, they own the top half of that IDMZ. Then you get into there, and if you have a plant that's, let's say, 1 million square feet and got hundreds of process area cell zones and lines in it, well, now you're talking about dozens and dozens of different networking solutions that are in that plant, right? Like the DLR ring we brought up, right? I mean, how many networks do we go into where that level 2 network, the control network, is just a flat layer 2 unmanaged environment, right? Right. A lot, right? And the question is, are you in the winner or the loser bucket, right? From a government perspective. So all that stuff that feds are pushing out on what you should be doing, are you a winner or are you a loser? Because they pick winners and losers. We saw that during COVID. Which businesses can stay open? Which businesses got to close? Who's the government going to cater to on who they think should really be paying attention and doing this? Critical infrastructure? Yeah, but how good are they at it?
Yeah. Well, critical infrastructure is already mandated for zero trust, and now they're recommending in OT across other areas.
Yeah, but how many municipalities do we come across, critical infrastructure, water, wastewater, and power, that are still not even close?
I got the number.
Yeah, right. That's exactly. So you can say whatever you want, but if you're not going to put teeth to it, it doesn't matter. At the same time, this is a very small community when you think about OT cybersecurity. And so how are you going to change that dynamic? You're really going to have to rely on these partners. And there's not, if there's 1,000 integrators in North America, I bet there's probably 5 or 10 that actually have practices with cybersecurity partnerships, with resources on staff, a practice in place, and a strategy on how to implement zero trust and OT cybersecurity technologies and solutions within the manufacturing environment. Not very many,
No, very few, very
very
few.
few, right? And so, as a CISO or a CIO, it's your job to find out who they are. Because if you're trying to really solve this problem, you're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to contact them and find out who's capable and who is not, and find out what they're doing in your environment on a daily basis, because they're out there doing startup and commissioning, they're out there doing maintenance and support, they're out there with technologies, whether they're actually on site physically or they're remoting in. You need to get your arms around that. And if you're not willing to do that, then you just stick to your business systems and call it a day.
Yeah. And those CISOs, those organizations, when I read through this adapting zero trust document, it's extensive. There's a lot of stuff there. There's like four little bullet points. Why it matters. Back to this topic. Why it matters. Zero trust is now the operational baseline for critical infrastructure where properly adapted for industrial systems. It explicitly rejects rip and replace. We just talked about. Designed for environments where cyber incidents can cause physical damage, safety incidents, or severe disruptions. Again, back to the OT space, and validates OT realities, including legacy systems, safety first principles, and passive monitoring. Again, IT organizations that are going to try and adapt this are going to have some struggles, and the OT teams that are already tasked with 600 other jobs that are not getting paid for 590 of those are not going to want to figure it out. They're going to need help. They're going to need guidance. And we and other organizations can be that support system to do that. There's no reason to do this by themselves.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not so much trying to talk about what our organization does. It's how do you build a strategy that it's going to encompass all of this, right? And it's very difficult because it's been going on for a while. I mean, this is not a new thing, and OT's been at it for quite a while, doing what they do, and they've been successful at it per se. But I would also say that a lot of manufacturers have a lot of unplanned, unscheduled downtime due to disruptions with the environment that they can't quite put their fingers on, right? And losing millions and millions of dollars a year into a black hole in the middle of their plant because they shoot from the hip when they make control system changes. Or IT has got enough hooks into the environment that they're disruptive doing the things that they're doing, right? Round peg, square hole, because they don't realize that scanning the network at the wrong time of day can be very disruptive to the plant, or implementing an IT cybersecurity tool that's pounding the crap out of my control system environment and being disruptive, right? Or at the same time, just ignoring things that are shutting my plant down, right? Why is my filler not running correctly? Did somebody put a rogue asset in here? Did somebody make a PLC change? Do I have malicious IPs in the environment? I mean, as an OT company getting ready to walk into a plant, I'd like to know if you have malware in here. Can you demonstrate to me that you don't have malware in your plant? What tool are you using? What data do you have to show me that this environment is pristine and clean? Nobody, right? And I'm going to touch your network. I'm bringing technology in. I got 20 guys showing up over the next 6 months with their own laptops. They're going to plug right into your network to do programming of control systems. And you don't know what's on their machines. Nobody's looked at them. And they're connecting right into your space. And they're setting up remote access. And they have remote access on their laptops. that they're bringing in, these engineering programming workstations, and you're not chasing any of that stuff, right? The question is, are you? How you can get to zero trust when you look at what I just described? And this happens every day, all day, in all these places. Now, you can fall back to critical infrastructure and say, well, our practice and policies are different. But if I ask those same questions, what answers would I get? Right? Again, prove to me that you don't have malware in your environment. You can probably do that. In IT, you can do that, right? You can do that. You got the tools to do that. You have the inventory to do that. That's something that a CISO could pull up really quick on a report and show, hey, today we're good, right? They can't do that on the plant floor. And so how are you gonna get over that hump when you've got 50 integrators and OEMs involved in your 50 plants?
Yeah, it's a tall hurdle. We could have this conversation for the next 5 days and not touch on the top of it. So, but I think that for those that are listening, if you haven't seen the report, get your hands on it. Email me. I'll get you the report. You can get it on our website. We'll make the report available. It's a public report. Look at it. Begin figuring out, what is your strategy? Where are you in the process? What do you need to do? What guidance do you need? What support do you need? How far along are you? Start making a plan to begin addressing zero trust in your OT environment. You got to start somewhere.
Right. I get it. So one of the largest North American automation technology vendors, and you know who they are, we've been talking about the events. Where do you go to find, if you're going to a pure OT event of some sort, some conference, one, there's hardly any IT people at these events, right? And cybersecurity in a lot of cases isn't even discussed. Or if it is, it's such a high level conversation that they can't make it realistic on how they do it, because the manufacturer, who may have some people there, don't have that responsibility and really don't understand the technologies. I mean, you throw out terms like Armis or Clarity or Nozomi or Cisco Cybervision, Dragos, you throw those names out there, in a lot of cases, they don't know who they are, right? And so this very large automation technology vendor who tries to go to events where the IT guys are, your CISOs and your CIOs and your InfoSec people and your networking people, the leaders of these organizations, they're not even attending those anymore because they don't have any conversations with those people in regards to, oh, well, I think we're a big customer of yours. As a matter of fact, we spend $25 million a year buying your stuff, maintaining and supporting it, and using integrators who certified to use your technology. They're not even doing that anymore, right? So as a CISO, where are you going to go to learn about OT cybersecurity? Right? This ecosystem we're talking about, if you're going to go think you're going to find that at Black Hat or RSA or Cisco Live, you won't. These organizations are still in the IT realm and thinking that their IT practices are going to work in your OT environment. And so then you have to start going to OT specific cybersecurity events, if you will. And those are attended very minimally, where RSA or Black Hat might have tens of thousands. You go to an OT cybersecurity event. I just went to one down in Atlanta last month. There was 200 people there. My point is that you're fishing in the wrong ponds, right? On either side of the fence to try to solve this problem. And the government, not practitioners either. They might be with their Department of War systems that they use from a military perspective, from a Department of War, defense, whatever you want to call it, perspective. Their stuff. The power that feeds those places, they have influence in there. But you move out into the middle of the country, these municipalities and these chemical plants and these food and beverage plants and these pharmaceutical plants, you're not going to find that. You're not. It is what it is, right? And what's the right answer? If I'm a CISO, the first thing I'm going to do is call my plant people and say, I want to know who the integrators are and the OEMs that we buy equipment from that are in my manufacturing environment. I need their names. I need to know who they are. I need to have a chat with them.
Great, great advice. And I would say spot on.
That'd be the first thing I'd do. Get them all in the room, and interview them to find out what their capabilities are, what kind of partnerships do they have, what kind of practice do they have, and start from there.
Yeah. Great advice. Don't do it by yourselves.
You can't, because if you could, you would. And if you were doing it, we'd know about it because we're the ones that are standing down there in the environment and fighting the fires every day, trying to keep your plants up and running.
All right. I think we've exhausted it. You guys have a great day. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.